Yo, what is up? We are through the first week of the NBA season, and we want to go through some of our buy low candidates for the rest of the season, guys that we value higher than what we perceive the public and your league mates are going to value these guys. They're not necessarily like must acquire players. Like, I'm not looking and trying to get these guys by any means, but just where we think your league mates are valuing these guys, it's much lower than we expect for the rest of the season. So guys, we're definitely looking to acquire. First up here, I've got Jamal Murray, coming off the injury. I know, managers are probably pretty frustrated with, him playing like 27 minutes. He shot pretty poorly and his numbers are looking significantly worse, right? Instead of, the 18, 20 points and 4 rebounds and 4 assists, it's, closer to 12 points and, 2 rebounds, 2 assists in those limited minutes. Obviously, the talk about him missing some back-to-backs. But for me, I'm pretty excited about Jamal Murray from the perspective of basically shooting percentage is something that you expect to come back to the mean and what we've seen from him. So, the mid 30%, I expect that to increase. I really like Murray. I think that he can return similarly to what we saw the last time we saw him in a full season. Even if he's not up to that, I think he'll be around a 16, 17, 18 point guy and, be able to get you, 3-4 boards and, a handful of assists as well. So he's a guy who I think managers are probably really frustrated with and felt like he was a risky pick coming off the injury, and they might be willing to sell him lower than I think his worth is for the rest of the season, especially with me expecting those minutes to come up. A general theme, a lot of coaches will be pretty cautious with players coming back from significant injuries. So early in the season, it's not crazy to see limited minutes, resting back-to-backs. I think, I'm expecting him to kind of come into form, in the next couple of weeks heading into the mid part of the season.
Yeah, definitely. And to kind of piggyback off that, I'm going to expand on that with the next guy, which is Kawhi Leonard, another guy coming off of injury, another guy that we acknowledge, he's going to rest back-to-backs, and it might be a little bit until he's that 30-plus per minute guy a game. But even to start, he's been efficient in this limited time he's had, even the limited role off the bench. I mean, this is a guy that's got first-round value, right? So you could probably buy him for, much lower value right now, that people are not going to be selling him for first round value, that's for sure. You might have to wait it out for a month or maybe two with these lower minutes coming off the bench, what have you, but he's had a full year to rest. There's no reason to think that he can't be normal Kawhi mid-season, and he's been pretty efficient, like I said, to start this year. Just not a lot of minutes, and they're being very, very careful with them, which from an NBA a team perspective, it makes sense, for Murray and Kawhi. But these are guys that have had some good rest, and mid-season we shouldn't be surprised if they're kind of back to, if not very close to, their prime or their most recent form of these top guys in the league that they are. So these are definitely two guys that you can maybe catch some league mates being frustrated with very early and very impatient with. And if you maybe have a good roster, or you're willing to wait a month or two until these guys are back to 30 plus minutes a game, I think these are definitely great buy low options.
Definitely. And the next one here, it's Colin Sexton. I know he's been a tough name. He was probably a guy who was drafted, somewhat earlier in the mid rounds as an upside piece. There's a lot of excitement about the trade to the Jazz and the opportunity and usage he could potentially see, but he's really been like a 15 to 20 minute guy off the bench, which obviously is not what managers were expecting. So I think he's tough, right? We've gotten a lot of questions on the streams of, should I drop Colin Sexton? And for me, I think his upside vastly outweighs whatever production you would get from, streamers or guys you would take off the waiver wire in most competitive leagues. So I wouldn't trade like a significant consistent starter for him. But I think if people are talking about dropping him, he's probably valued extremely low in most leagues. So you could probably get him on the dirt cheap. And I mean, we're only one season removed from him being a 24 point, 3 board and 4 assist guy for the Cavs. So I think there's a real possibility that, we see him start to play a little better and he starts to eat into Beasley's minutes, and he, moves himself from a 15 to 20 minute guy to potentially 25 minutes, even if it's not starting. He can still have a strong rotational role. And I think we can see that improve. So I think he has a ton of upside. And for me, if you're able to hold on to him and, kind of keep him for now, I know rosters are tough in a lot of leagues. There's some that are, really, really shallow, and you really have to be cutting guys that aren't producing a ton. But I mean, we saw it even in the game one. I mean, he had, 20 points in 20 minutes, right? So I think he's able to have that production in the limited work, and I think he has upside to outperform what he's doing right now for sure.
Yeah, he's been very efficient off the bench. They have a lot of players there, but yeah, if he gets the minutes, he's going to be the guy that people probably drafted him to be. Next up here, we've got Ben Simmons, a really polarizing one. Another guy that people have, asked us in questions on the streams about if they should drop him or if they should trade him, all this kind of stuff. Obviously, there's the memes. He's fouled out in 2 of the 3 games. He can't shoot the ball, that fun stuff. The one game he didn't foul out, actually, he had 6 points, 10 boards, 8 assists, 2 blocks. A really good foundation for what he can do moving forward. So he's had 10 plus boards and assists combined in every game that he's had so far. We knew the scoring wasn't going to be great. We knew he wasn't going to be really that great either. But people are selling him and trying to draft him like he's just worthless and he's not going to be anything moving forward. But then you have people who have guys like Draymond Green who really value, those do-it-all guys. And Draymond's averaging 8 points, 4 boards, 6 assists on the year. Ben's averaging 6 points, 6 boards, 7 assists on the year. And they're both pretty comparable in the defensive side as well. So, I think people maybe get a little carried away with the meme and the off-court stuff with Ben Simmons and really don't like him anymore. But I think he's got potential to really be back to what he used to be, maybe not scoring wise, right? Especially on this crowded offensive team. But he's a potential drop for a lot of people right now. And, there's a big variance of where people drafted him. So I get it. I get the polarization here, but I would much rather have a Ben Simmons, than a guy that's like a Lonnie Walker that you're streaming for a game that could pop off, or Chetty Osman that some people are streaming. So, you can get Ben Simmons for guys that just pop off for a couple of games because people are just so fed up and don't think there's any future for him. But he's got a really high floor. He does it all over the court, and you don't really just need the scoring. And I think that's the one thing that probably is the biggest issue for him. But you're not getting Simmons to put up 20 points a game, right? You're getting him because he's a great rebounder, great at passing and assists, and he's good at defensive stats. He's already done that a little bit. So, even though it sounds so bad so far, he's actually done decently in that aspect. The scoring and the fouling out is, funny and kind of sad, but I still think he's got such a high floor, and moving forward, it can kind of only go up from here. And so I really like the foundation that he has moving forward. If he can just start to play 25 plus minute games, he's not going to foul out every game. It's just, he hasn't been playing basketball in over a year now. We got to remember that. So it's going to take him a little bit to get used to it. He's on a new team. But I really like the foundation that he can give you specifically in a points league.
Yeah, definitely. And you talked about it outside of the scoring, which obviously, has not been there. And, you've seen some pretty bad field goal percentage and, the memes and everything. But yeah, just being a stat sheet filler. It's massive. Even in these games that he's been bad and fouled out, he's still getting you, pretty consistent, floor value there. And I think it could even be better than that. Next up here, I've got Tyrese Maxey, who I think was a lot of people's popular breakout. And I know he's had some really strong games to start the season, but, just kind of looking at this last game, and I think, maybe people's minds on Maxey might have shifted a little bit. Only had 8 points, 2 boards, 3 assists, 1 defensive stat against the Pacers. That looked like a really good spot. Didn't shoot a ton in that game. We've seen the emergence of Harden, obviously Embiid's there as well. And Tobias Harris has had some pretty strong games, but this is kind of what we expected from Maxey and Harris, that they would kind of share these big blow-up games, right? Maxey had 25 against the Spurs, and we've seen, Tobias Harris has some pretty strong, pretty efficient shooting games, which I think you'll get from Harris. But for me, I'd just rather have Maxey. I think there's a lot more upside. I know Harris, fills the stat sheet a little bit more, but I think for me, for a guy like Maxey, I'm expecting, really, really solid volume. I know Harden's had a really strong, start to the season from a scoring perspective, but I still think Maxey's in a spot where he can have games closer to what we saw at the start of the season, where he was 21 points in that Celtics game, 25 in the Spurs, and he just didn't shoot a ton in this Pacers game. So I think maybe you just kind of check the minds of the Maxey manager, see where they're at there, just because I think he's a guy who's not necessarily like super low value to people, but I think he might have gone early enough in drafts. He was a pretty popular breakout guy that it might be willing to trade him for lower, because maybe they don't believe in the breakout as much off of this last game.
Yeah, I think Maxey's still going to shoot the ball a lot. He hasn't been shooting as much as we saw consistently last year, but I still really like him to put up really good numbers, play more minutes, and be a lot more consistent than Toby just in general. And with Harden being more aggressive, maybe that hurts a little bit. But we've seen Harden be on high octane offenses and get others involved, because even though he is scoring a lot, he's still getting others involved a lot too. So I think Maxey is more of a bit of an overreaction scenario. People kind of getting, really frustrated and overreacting to the start, and I think you can take advantage of that. Next up here, we've got Evan Mobley. He's played, 3 interesting games so far. The Raptors' first game, tough defense for like the 2, 3, 4, 5 spots. They're very good defensively, always involved in those lower scoring games. Bulls game it was a blowout game, only played 25 minutes. And then the Wizards game, he actually had a decent game. He just shot poorly. He had 3 defensive stats with 2 for 7 shooting, but 6 from the line. So, the foundation is there for him still to be involved and get you good stats. So I think if you're just looking like a box score watcher, statistically, you're just kind of looking at, what he's been producing. I think you can find a silver lining there, and there's a lot of good, production there. The defensive production is definitely there in every single game. It's just, game 1, tough matchup. I think he just didn't do very well. Game 2, a blowout, by the Cavs to the Bulls. And then game 3, decent game, just kind of poorer shooting. So I think there's still a lot of volume there. A lot of opportunity there. I think he'll still play 30 plus minutes in these games that aren't blowouts, and he's going to get you defensive stats, and I think he'll get more involved offensively, especially when he starts playing, more mid-level teams. So I wouldn't worry about any kind of hurts to his offensive production or anything like that. With Garland being back, I think that could help if anything. So just, if you got Mobley, hold on to him, and if you have a league mate that's frustrated with him, I think you should scoop him up.
Yeah, and just the upside too. I know a lot of people like to crown, I was so right about this player. Like the breakout wasn't happening in the first week of the season, but the NBA season and these player seasons are decided in the first like 4 or 5 games, and I think a lot of people, fantasy managers react too quickly to things, and they take a look at the first few games and they think, oh man, I reach for Mobley. I got to look to move him, see what I can get for him. So I think he's one of those guys that just has immense upside. And I think definitely you check the pulse of that manager there, see if you can get him for cheap. Next up here is a guy who's not been, I don't want to say he's been bad for what you expect from him, but Mikal Bridges I have on here. He's not been awful or anything. But I think just his, low scoring that he's kind of just had throughout his career and what you expect from him, this season with the Suns as well, probably, dampers, fantasy managers' value of him. But man, he's playing 38 minutes a night right now. And I don't think he'll do that throughout the entire season. He'll probably be closer to like the 34, 35 that we saw last season. But man, just playing monster minutes, a guy that's, gonna fill the stat sheet, and he's already doing that this season. And the defensive stat upside as well in a points league, right? To get you, potentially 1 to 2 defensive stats a game, which is kind of just what he's done his career. I just think he's going to play monster minutes for the Suns team, no Crowder. And yeah, if you're getting 35, 36 minutes from a guy who's getting to play with Chris Paul, obviously the offensive usage of Ayton and Devin Booker, but he really doesn't need that, right? It's just kind of a cherry on top if Bridges gets you 15 points in a night, right? If he's kind of filling the stat sheet a little bit with rebounds and assists. So I think he's one of those guys who I don't think is necessarily like dirt cheap and, you can scoop him up really low. But I think if the manager's taking a look at these last couple of games, right, and obviously, this last game against the Clippers, 7 points, right? 7 points, 4 boards, and 4 assists. You expect more from Bridges than that. And I think he's got a lot of upside game in and game out to, even give you higher scoring games. I know he's only been like a 13, 14 point guy, over the past couple seasons, but he has that upside. He's willing to shoot. He's on the floor with Chris Paul and Devin Booker as well, who, will get him some opportunities. So I think just a guy who's going to play 36, 37 minutes is more of a consistent starter than I think most people believe in for him for fantasy.
Yeah, he's an interesting one because, like you said, he hasn't really been bad or anything, and we don't expect him to put up crazy like shooting numbers as far as like points goes. But people maybe that drafted him maybe have thought that he was going to break out a little bit, so maybe they're getting frustrated with a slower start offensively. But he might be one of the safest buy lows, right? Because a lot of these other guys, maybe they're injured or the situation's different. Bridges, like you said, he's going to get the minutes, he's going to play a lot of games, and he's going to get you, good boards and good defensive stats and some scoring here and there. So you know what to expect from him. So he's a very safe buy low, actually. It's just a matter of if you have, a league mate that was really expecting a breakout of him, specifically without Crowder there, alongside Booker and Chris Paul here, then you could, really take advantage of that and get a guy that is going to be pretty consistent for you.
That does it for our buy lows. Let us know in the comments if there's anybody we missed, guys that you're looking to buy low that we didn't talk about here. Would love to see that. And just a reminder, don't overreact, right? This is buy lows are taking advantage of your league mates that are overreacting to the first week of the season. definitely look to, buy low on some guys who've had some pretty low efficiency shooting, right? That you've seen long careers of them being better than that in the first week. Definitely could take advantage of some league mates, make your roster stronger. We'll see you in the next one.